In a small, quiet town in the southern United States, life moves at a slow and predictable pace. The streets are lined with aging buildings, family-owned shops, and a modest police precinct that stands as a symbol of authority. But beneath the surface of this seemingly peaceful town lies a history of unresolved tensions, the kind that doesn't make headlines but lives in the hearts of its residents. Among them is Amara, a determined and compassionate black woman in her early 30s. She runs the Hope Community Help Center, a place where people can come for guidance, resources, and a listening ear. Amara is known not just for her kindness, but for her unshakable resolve to stand up for what's right. Whether it's helping a struggling single mother find housing or mentoring teenagers, Amara is the backbone of her community. On the other side of town is Officer Bradley, a white cop in his mid-40s. His reputation precedes him, harsh, dismissive, and, as many in the black community would say, outright racist. For years, Bradley has operated with impunity, his actions overlooked or justified by a system that turns a blind eye to bias. To some, he's just a cop doing his job. To others, he's a figure of intimidation and fear. The tipping point comes one evening when a young black teenager named Malik, a regular at Amara's center, has an unsettling encounter with Bradley. Malik was walking home when Bradley stopped him, accusing him of loitering and questioning him aggressively. The confrontation escalated quickly, leaving Malik shaken and humiliated. When he shared the story with Amara the next day, her heart burned with anger and determination. This wasn't the first time she'd heard a story like this, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. For too long, her community had been living under the shadow of unchecked power and prejudice. Amara decided then and there that enough was enough. It was time to take a stand, not just for Malik, but for everyone who had ever been silenced or ignored. As the sun set over the town that day, Amara began planning her next steps, unaware of just how far her fight for justice would take her, or the risks she'd have to face along the way. The town hall was packed that evening, the air thick with tension and anticipation. Residents of all ages had gathered, their voices low but charged with frustration. At the front of the room sat a panel of local officials, including Officer Bradley, his arms crossed, his face wearing an expression of practiced indifference. Amara stood near the back, observing the room carefully, her resolve growing stronger with each passing moment. When her turn to speak came, Amara walked to the podium with quiet confidence. Her voice was steady, calm, yet filled with an undercurrent of passion. She began by addressing the broader issues facing the community, careful not to directly name Bradley but weaving her words to make it clear who she was talking about. "For years we've asked for fairness," Amara said, her eyes sweeping the room. "For years we've trusted those in power to protect and serve all of us equally. And yet time and time again some members of our community find themselves singled out, questioned, harassed, and treated as suspects simply for existing." The room murmured in agreement, but Bradley's smirk only widened. He leaned forward, interrupting her mid-sentence. "With all due respect, Ms. Amara," he said, his tone dripping with condescension, "if people would just follow the law, maybe they wouldn't have these so-called problems." The crowd stiffened, but Amara didn't miss a beat. She looked directly at him, her voice firm but composed. "Following the law isn't the issue, Officer Bradley. The issue is when those enforcing the law abuse it to target people who look a certain way, live in certain neighborhoods, or dare to ask questions." Bradley chuckled, a cold and calculated sound. "You seem to know a lot about how the law works, Ms. Amara. Maybe you should put on a badge and see how it feels on the other side." Her gaze didn't waver. "Maybe I will," she shot back, her voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the room. "But for now, I'm here to make sure those who wear the badge are held to the same standards they expect from the rest of us." The tension in the room was palpable as the crowd began to stir. Some clapped softly, while others exchanged glances of discomfort. Bradley leaned back in his chair, his smirk replaced with a glare, his arrogance beginning to crack. He didn't say another word, but his eyes locked on Amara, a silent warning she couldn't ignore. That night, Amara returned to her office with a fire burning inside her. She began gathering everything she could: community testimonies, old records, even video evidence that neighbors had collected over the years. She didn't just want to confront Bradley, she wanted to expose the entire pattern of his behavior. As she dug deeper, she began to hear whispers of something even darker. People started coming forward, cautiously at first, sharing rumors that Bradley might be involved in more than just racial profiling. Stories of suspiciously inflated fines, missing money, and planted evidence began to surface, painting a picture far worse than Amara had imagined. The deeper she went, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about one officer's bias. It was about corruption, abuse of power, and a system that had let him get away with it for years. Amara knew she was walking a dangerous line, but she also knew she couldn't stop. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. Amara sat in her office, surrounded by maps, notes, and witness testimonies. The rumors of Officer Bradley's corruption were growing louder, but rumors weren't enough. She needed undeniable proof, something so irrefutable that it would force the town and the police department to act. That's when the idea hit her. She would set a trap. Bradley's biases and arrogance would be his own downfall. The next day, Amara met with Malik, the young man who had been harassed by Bradley. Sitting across from him, she explained her plan. "Malik, you're brave for coming forward," she said, "but I need your help one more time. We're going to show everyone what Bradley is really like, and I promise you won't be alone in this." Malik hesitated, but eventually nodded. "If it helps stop him from doing this to someone else, I'm in," he said, his voice firm despite the fear in his eyes. Amara and Malik, along with a few trusted community members, set the plan into motion. They decided on a quiet, affluent neighborhood, one where Malik's presence would draw Bradley's attention. Malik would drive through the area in his old car, equipped with a hidden camera, while Amara recorded from a safe distance. The goal was simple: to let Bradley's actions speak for themselves. The day of the operation arrived, and tension hung in the air. Malik drove slowly through the neighborhood, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Amara parked a block away, her phone ready to record. She could see Bradley's patrol car lurking nearby, as if waiting for an opportunity. It didn't take long. Bradley's car pulled out of its spot, the flashing lights snapping on as he sped up to catch Malik. Amara's heart raced as she pressed record, her camera capturing everything. "License and registration!" Bradley barked as he approached Malik's window. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" "Just driving, sir," Malik replied calmly, his voice steady despite the obvious tension. "Driving, huh?" Bradley's eyes scanned Malik's car, his expression dripping with suspicion. "Your brake light looks out. Step out of the car." Amara zoomed in with her phone. She knew Malik's brake lights were fine. They had checked them that morning. This was Bradley's usual tactic, fabricating a reason to justify his stop. As the interaction continued, Amara decided to step in. She walked toward the scene, her phone still recording, a neutral smile on her face. "Officer Bradley," she called out, her tone casual but deliberate. "Small world. Everything okay here?" Bradley stiffened, glancing at her before responding, his tone sharp. "Routine stop, Ms. Amara. Nothing to worry about." Amara approached Malik's car, pretending to inspect the brake lights. "Huh, that's strange. Both lights seem to be working fine to me," she said lightly, her voice loud enough for her phone's microphone to catch every word. Bradley's jaw tightened, his frustration evident. "Ma'am, I'd appreciate it if you let me handle this," he said, his tone carrying a thinly veiled threat. "Of course, officer," Amara replied, stepping back. "Just making sure everything's fair. You know how people talk." She smiled innocently, but her eyes held a challenge Bradley couldn't ignore. Bradley finished the stop quickly, letting Malik go with a grumbled warning. As he walked back to his car, his eyes lingered on Amara, a silent promise that he wasn't done with her yet. That night, Bradley sat in his car, parked in a dark alley. His mind replayed the encounter with Amara. She was onto him, and he knew it. His fingers tapped nervously against the steering wheel as he stared out into the night, his frustration building. For Amara, the trap had worked perfectly. She had footage of Bradley's unnecessary stop, his fabricated reason, and his discomfort under scrutiny. But she also knew that Bradley wasn't the type to back down quietly. As she reviewed the footage late into the night, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Bradley had been exposed, but a cornered man was often the most dangerous. Late at night, Amara sat alone in her office, the glow of her laptop illuminating her face. The footage of Bradley's stop had confirmed what she already knew, but she needed more, something indisputable, something that could expose the depth of his corruption. She sifted through hours of documents, scanned files, and notes from community members who had come forward. Every detail mattered. And then she found it. Among the records of fines and reports filed by Bradley, a pattern began to emerge. The fines were disproportionately issued to black residents with suspiciously inflated amounts. Amara cross-referenced them with payment records from the town's treasury. Something didn't add up. Thousands of dollars in fines seemed to have disappeared, unaccounted for. Her heart raced as she pieced it together. Bradley was skimming money from these fines, pocketing the cash under the radar. The deeper she dug, the worse it got. A community member had provided security footage from months earlier, showing Bradley conducting a stop outside a local store. In the grainy video, he could be seen planting a small bag in the car's back seat before calling for backup. The driver, a young black man, had been arrested for possession, his life forever changed by the false charge. Amara couldn't believe the extent of what she was uncovering. Bradley wasn't just biased, he was actively abusing his power in ways that destroyed lives. She immediately called Reggie, the local journalist she had partnered with before. "Reggie, this is bigger than I thought," she said breathlessly. "I have proof of everything, skimming fines, planting evidence. It's all here." Reggie's voice was cautious but firm. "We need to act fast, Amara. If Bradley catches wind of this, he'll do everything in his power to shut it down." Amara and Reggie spent the next few days assembling an airtight case. They compiled video evidence, testimonies, financial records, and every shred of proof they could find. Reggie agreed to write an exposé, but they both knew that wasn't enough. They needed a public moment, a confrontation that Bradley couldn't escape from. But Bradley wasn't oblivious. As Amara's investigation gained momentum, whispers began to reach him. Late one night, as Amara locked up the help center, she felt a presence behind her. Turning, she saw Bradley leaning against his patrol car, his expression cold and calculating. "Burning the midnight oil, Ms. Amara," he said, his voice low but menacing. "You've been busy lately, asking a lot of questions." Amara met his gaze, refusing to show any fear. "I'm doing what I always do, helping the community. Is there a problem with that, Officer Bradley?" He took a step closer, his tone darkening. "You should be careful. People who dig too deep sometimes find themselves in over their heads." Amara didn't flinch. "Is that a threat, officer?" "Because I'm pretty sure that sounds like one." Bradley chuckled, but the laughter didn't reach his eyes. "You think you're untouchable, don't you? Let me tell you something. You don't know how this game works. People like me, we always win." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked back to his car, the sound of his boots echoing in the quiet street. Amara stood there, her heart pounding, but her resolve unwavering. Bradley's arrogance and threats only confirmed what she already knew. She was getting too close, and he was afraid. Back in her office, Amara and Reggie finalized their plan. The evidence was damning. the story airtight. Now it was only a matter of timing. Amara knew the risks, but she also knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about Bradley anymore. It was about justice for everyone he had wronged, and for every person who had been silenced by fear. As the night stretched on, Amara stared at the mountain of evidence in front of her. The fight was far from over, but the truth was finally within reach. The town hall was alive with tension. Every seat was filled, and more people stood along the walls, eager to see what the night would reveal. Cameras from local news outlets were positioned at the back, their red lights glowing as they prepared to broadcast the event. The air buzzed with anticipation, whispers, and the occasional murmur of doubt or support. At the center of it all, Amara stood calmly, her focus unwavering. Officer Bradley sat near the panel of officials, his arms crossed tightly, his expression a mix of defiance and unease. He had heard rumors of what Amara had been planning, but he wasn't ready to back down. In his mind, this was a game, and he had always known how to play it. When Amara's turn to speak arrived, the room fell silent. She walked to the podium, her presence commanding respect. Her voice, steady but powerful, echoed through the hall. "Good evening. Tonight we gather to discuss accountability. For too long we've allowed certain patterns to go unchecked, patterns that harm our community and erode our trust in those meant to protect us. But tonight, we have the opportunity to face the truth and demand change." The crowd watched intently as Amara gestured toward Reggie, who stood by the projector. With a click of a button, the first piece of evidence appeared on the screen, a series of financial records. Amara's voice remained steady as she explained. "These are records of fines issued over the past 5 years. At first glance, they seem normal, but upon closer inspection, you'll see discrepancies. Fines collected, but never deposited into town accounts. Thousands of dollars missing." Murmurs rippled through the audience, and Bradley shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Amara continued, her voice growing more pointed. "Who handled these fines? Officer Bradley, and that's just the beginning." Reggie played the next clip, grainy security footage showing Bradley during a traffic stop. The crowd leaned forward as they watched him slip a small bag into the back seat of the car before calling for backup. Gasps filled the room, followed by a tense silence. Amara took a deep breath. "This isn't just bias. This is corruption, abuse of power, lives ruined by false charges, money stolen from our community. And it's all right here." The room erupted in chatter, some in shock, others in anger. Bradley stood abruptly, his face red with fury. "This is a damn setup," he shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. "This woman is twisting things to fit her agenda. You think you can just ruin my career with some doctored videos and rumors?" Amara turned to face him, her voice calm but resolute. "Officer Bradley, these aren't rumors. This is evidence. Your own actions are your undoing." Bradley stepped forward, pointing a finger at her. "You don't know what you're talking about. People like you. You don't understand what it takes to keep this town safe. You're all talk, stirring up trouble where there isn't any." Amara didn't flinch. "Keeping this town safe doesn't mean targeting the vulnerable or abusing your authority. If doing the right thing means stirring up trouble, then so be it." Bradley's temper boiled over. "You think you're untouchable, don't you? You don't know how this world works. You're just a—" He stopped himself, realizing the entire exchange was being live-streamed. Reporters' cameras were locked on him, capturing his every word, his every movement. The audience stared, some in shock, others with growing disdain. Amara spoke again, her voice cutting through the silence. "The world is watching, Officer Bradley. And so is this community. Your actions and your words speak for themselves." Bradley's colleagues on the panel exchanged uneasy glances, clearly aware that the situation was spiraling out of control. Finally, the chief of police, seated at the far end of the panel, cleared his throat and stood. After reviewing the evidence presented tonight, he said, his voice heavy, we have no choice but to place Officer Bradley on immediate suspension pending a full investigation. The room erupted again, this time with a mix of cheers and angry shouts. Bradley's face twisted in disbelief as he stormed out of the room, ignoring the cameras and the voices calling after him. Amara stood silently for a moment, watching him go. She knew this was only a small victory. The system that had enabled Bradley's behavior was still intact, and there was a long road ahead. But tonight, the truth had been exposed, and that was a step forward. As the crowd began to disperse, the divisions within the town became clear. Some people thanked Amara, their voices filled with gratitude and hope. Others whispered among themselves, casting skeptical or hostile glances in her direction. The fight for justice had revealed the fractures in the community, but it had also sparked something powerful, an unwillingness to stay silent. The morning after the town hall, Amara sat in her office, the weight of the previous night still fresh in her mind. The news of Bradley's suspension had spread quickly, dominating headlines and conversations. For the first time in years, the town was forced to confront the uncomfortable truths it had long ignored. Amara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. It wasn't just about Bradley. It was about the countless people who had suffered silently, their voices drowned out by fear and injustice. She knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time she felt hope that change was possible. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. It was Malik, standing with a hesitant smile. "Ms. Amara," he said, "I just wanted to thank you. For everything. You didn't just help me. You helped all of us." Amara smiled warmly, gesturing for him to sit. "Malik, this wasn't just me. It was you, and everyone else who stood up and spoke out. That's how change happens, when we come together." As they talked, Amara's phone buzzed with notifications. Messages of support poured in from across the community and beyond. Some thanked her for her courage. Others shared their own stories of injustice. But mixed in were messages of anger and resistance, reminders of how deeply rooted the divisions in the town were. Later that day, Amara joined a group of volunteers at the Help Center. They were organizing a workshop on civic engagement, teaching people how to advocate for policy changes and hold local leaders accountable. The room was filled with energy, a mix of determination and cautious optimism. Addressing the group, Amara said, "What we did last night mattered, but it's only the beginning. Change doesn't come overnight, and it doesn't come easy. It takes work, real, hard work. But if we stick together, if we stay strong, we can build something better, not just for us, but for the generations to come." Her words were met with applause, the sound echoing through the room like a rallying cry. As the day went on, the community began to heal in small but significant ways. Neighbors who had never spoken before found common ground. Conversations about justice and equality became more open, more honest. And while some still resisted the change, others embraced it, realizing the power of collective action. Meanwhile, the investigation into Bradley continued. Reports surfaced of other officers under scrutiny, their actions coming to light in the wake of Amara's revelations. The town's police department, once untouchable, was now under a microscope, forced to confront its own flaws. On a quiet evening, Amara walked through the neighborhood, passing the familiar faces of those she had fought for. Some greeted her with smiles and waves, others averted their eyes. She stopped in front of a mural painted on a brick wall, a vibrant depiction of diverse hands reaching toward the words, justice, unity, hope. A young girl painting the final touches looked up and asked, "Do you think things will really get better, Ms. Amara?" Amara crouched to her level, her voice gentle but firm. "I think they can, but it's up to all of us to make it happen." As she stood and walked away, her steps were purposeful, her resolve unshaken. The fight for justice was far from over, But Amara knew they had taken an important step, a step that proved that even in the face of fear and resistance, change was possible. The camera fades to black as her voice echoes in the background. Change isn't about one person or one victory. It's about all of us, standing together, refusing to give up. That's how we make the world better, one step at a time. Justice is a journey, not a destination. Together, we can create a better tomorrow.